Hello and welcome back to the channel and welcome to Road America. In this video I'll be covering a few aspects of setting up the Indy car. Firstly, I'll be looking at the track itself and the car we're going to be using. I'll then look at the fastest lap time I've been able to set, which is a current world record at 1:40.281. I'll also then take a look at the setup very in depth, and then I'll take a run around the circuit and point out a few areas where you need to pay a lot of attention to how you're attacking the track. Hello, welcome back. Here we are, just taking a little look. Let's have a look in the showroom. At the Dallara IR-12 Chevrolet and the road going version. A beautiful looking car, it really is. I don't think I've even had a look at it in this view before, but it really does look like a nice looking car. I do like the textures on the tyres as well. Yeah, well, let's just get into it. There's quite a few things to discuss. Obviously, there is the Honda you could use if you're looking at using one of the other Indy cars. But for today's video, we're just going to be featuring the Chevrolet as it's part of an ongoing time trial event that I'm currently taking part in within one of my Facebook groups. So hopefully I'm going to help out a few of the guys still taking part in the time trial. And obviously for future events or future tuning needs for this particular car, hopefully this video might help. So just as another point, we're looking at Road America, and obviously when you're looking at setting a car up, you need to be thinking about whether you're going to be using the full extent of downforce, or whether you need to be looking at more as a less dependent downforce circuit. And obviously just taking a look at Road America, it's a hugely non-downforce needing circuit, it really is. I mean, the amount of straights on this circuit, you're just trying to get the power down and get to maximum speed a lot of the time, so really minimal when it comes to downforce. For something like Monaco that's just a constant turning circuit, you're going to be using lots of high downforce. It's very hard to go through every single circuit, but you need to just sort of weigh up the straights versus the corners really, and that's all you can really go at. So let's just get into it and see what we're going to have a look at. So let's take a little look at the setup and just talk through a few of the points within the setup I've got. Now, when we start looking at the tyre pressures, in all tuning events, in all setups of every car worldwide, no matter what car you're looking at, there's always going to be a payoff. It's always a balancing act between a number of aspects. When it comes to the tyres, I think it's a payoff between acceleration, i.e. reaching a higher top speed, or reaching a higher top speed, or you're looking at grip. So it's always going to be a payoff between grip or acceleration. Now, if you look at the tyre pressure on the front, and then you look up into the top right hand corner of the screen, you'll see that I've got the tyre pressure set at 17.69 psi when it's cold, and you'll see the hot tyre pressure when it's on track is 21.9. Now, as far as I'm aware, the IndyCar or the F1s and all the Formula sort of 1 series, you're sort of really looking at a tyre pressure of around 21 is supposed to be like the tyre pressure. Well, it depends what you're wanting from the car really. If you're trying to produce more grip, you're probably going to soften the tyre a bit at the expense of acceleration. But it depends. Like I said, there's such a balancing act between what you're trying to achieve. So it really is awkward. You need to run like a few laps with the tyre pressures on, say 20, and then say on 25, and see what it's offering you. Is it better in a lap overall? And I don't mean just doing this first hand. This is really late in the game really. Once you start putting in really consistent lap times, then you can start altering things. When you first initially start building a setup, you're changing things just by small increments to see if it makes a difference. And then once you see a difference overall and you feel like you're setting consistent lap times, say you were setting a 145 and you were hitting 145 lap after lap after lap, then you can start altering things with your setup. Until you can hit consistent lap times, you don't know whether you're just hitting a random faster lap than a previous lap, or you've driven a corner slightly differently. It's only after you've got good at the circuit you can really start adjusting the setup. Unless you know there's something fundamentally wrong with your setup, don't initially think that it's the setup that's making you slow. So looking at the tyre pressures, I've got them set as they are because they offer good acceleration. I'm not losing too much on the top end, and I'm getting good acceleration out of the corners. That's why they're set where they are. Obviously I'm wanting more acceleration. I'm usually always swaying towards softer tyres at the rear. It's very, very rare I would go softer on the fronts than on the rear, unless I'm really trying to reduce some front end understeer at the expense of oversteer at the rear. When it comes to brake pressure, again, this is something very personal. It depends how much pressure you can modulate through your pedal comfortably without locking through the brakes. The brake balance, I've got this set slightly more forward. I think I had it around 56 initially, but I just seem to find that under braking, especially through one of the lifts as you go up and over the hill, I just really felt more towards the rear. It was really unbalancing the car, and I kept losing the rear end, so I gradually just brought this more and more forward. Just slightly open the front ducts. They're doing a lot more braking than the rear. Usually I would run them 0 and 0 for time trial, but there are quite a few heavy stopping sections on this circuit, and I just thought it really benefited the car. Now for the downforce at the rear, there's quite a few things going on here, because initially I started running the downforce all 0, no downforce at all, but then I seemed to find if you added 0.5 downforce at the rear, it didn't seem to make no difference to the top speed, and again added another one, and then again I came to 1.5. Now as you go to 2, you do seem to notice a tiny bit on the long straights that you're losing a little bit of speed. Now up until this point I also felt that it was adding a little bit more acceleration out of some of the corners. It just seemed to allow the car to get better grip at the rear. So just small increments, I just gradually increased this to a point where I felt happy with it. Moving to the suspension. Now the casters, I don't think I've adjusted the casters. I've got the steering, feels fairly heavy, and I don't think I've messed with the casters at all. The front cambers, obviously we're doing a lot of turning in to corners at high speed, and you just really wanted to get as much grip as possible through the front end of the car really, to try and make turning a little bit more responsive. Now the ride height plays a massive part of setting this car up. I'm sure if you've looked back to one of my previous videos, I forget where, it might have been Road Atlanta or something like that. At high speed, this car produces lots of downforce, lots of pressure on the car, and as the speed increases, the more the pressure puts on the car. Now, if you lower the car any lower than what I've got it set at here, you will start to decrease the top speed of the car. You'll start to decrease the amount the car accelerates, because after a certain amount of speed, it will just start pressing the car into the ground and you will actually start bottoming out. So you can't actually take the car any lower than what I've got it set at for this circuit. For other circuits it might differ, but I think I've got the car set as low as it's going to ever want to go really, with how soft the springs are and how high the bump stops are. Obviously the bump stops, they also play a huge part in how far the car will bottom out. So just bear that in mind when you're setting your ride height. Suspension, I was running this slightly harder. I think I had it around the 440. But yeah, just bringing it back down to 387. It's not as low as it'll go, but just to allow the car to move a little bit, and just obviously to aid traction through the corners. It also aids running over some of the curbs, but I wouldn't recommend running over any of them here, but there are a few undulations in the circuit, so I just didn't want to run it too hard. Now the camber at the rear, obviously if you start reducing the camber, you will aid acceleration purely because you've got more tyre in contact with the circuit during straight line acceleration. When you start coming out of corners, that's when the acceleration's going to suffer. If you've got it set at the minimum it'll go, you might not be able to get as much power down coming out of the corners, but you will be better accelerating once you're straight. Now there's a few points on this circuit, like I'm sure you're aware, when you're coming out of corners, you're going to want to be accelerating as soon as you can, so you're going to need to really add some rear camber. You don't want to add too much because it's going to hinder the acceleration once you start getting on the straights. Now the corners are pretty sharp on this circuit, and a lot of the corners after you've taken, or once you've come into a corner and you've gone through the corner, it's very quick through some of the corners on the high speed sections. So you don't really want to start adding loads of camber at the rear, because it's going to really hinder how much acceleration you get along the straights. Again, we've discussed ride height. You start going lower than that and you're going to be losing time. You could try it, but you really will. It'll suffer straight away. Now, looking at the rear spring, obviously that's an issue again, just regarding getting the traction down. And 9 times out of 10, I'll always run a softer spring at the rear than I will at the front. You want the front to be harder so that you can get more turning response. You start softening the front springs out and you'll get sort of a more lazy feeling car. Steering ratio, obviously, as you know, I'm using the McLaren wheel, so that's my wheel locking out, and I wanted the car to feel really responsive through the steering on this circuit, so I've got it set very low. It's not particularly twitchy, I don't find it twitchy. So yeah, again, personal preference. Now, the towing angle at the front and the towing angle at the rear, this is really to help the car feel more responsive through the turning phase of the corner. I think having it down at 0 doesn't offer as much response as -2, which is bringing the towing angle, the steering angle of the tyres exaggerated, is facing inwards. You wouldn't really have them facing outwards on the front, but on the rear they are slightly outwards. And I always try to think of this as sort of rear wheel and front wheel steering, I suppose. The more towing, so if you went all the way with towing like that and had a toe out at the rear, the car would feel more responsive, even more responsive on the turning phase of the corner. And also you'd be assisting keeping the car stable through the acceleration out of the corner with more rear toe angle added. But I think this is a happy medium. The anti-roll bars, I don't think I've adjusted these very much. I think I'd probably say I haven't adjusted them at all, coming from a previous tune. So however they're set now, I've set them for a reason, but they seem to run quite happily on this circuit. Moving to the dampers then, obviously the bump stops are adjusted in line with the suspension. I probably don't do this very often, but I'm running more than twice as much rebound. So these are really stiff on the suspension, even for the slow bumps. And just the same at the rear, it's almost twice as much on the rebound. Obviously the rebound will always be higher than the bump, and I think this is the case through every single car in this game, whether you're running a rally circuit or you're running street circuits. You would always go more bump, and I'd usually at least a quarter more on my rebound than I would set on my bump. So usually I'd probably have this at around 10,000. Say I'm running 7,000, I'd have it around 10,000 or 12,000. But I just kept increasing this I just really want the suspension to be back at full spring really quickly. So you're making the car much more rigid, really. I'm not going to these too much because these are a really fine tuning aspect of the car, and you could probably run the standard setups on the dampers and you probably won't lose that much time. They really are a fine tuning aspect, so if you think you're ever struggling with your settings and you're thinking the dampers are where you're losing all your time, it's probably not. If anything, it's probably the bump stops might be causing you an issue. So I generally just mess with them before I mess with anything else. The gear ratios, obviously we're not going to reduce the boost, we're not going to reduce the air intake, but the radio we're going to close it out because we're doing time trial. Obviously if you're using this for an event and you've got damage on, you're going to want to increase some of the radiator opening. Engine braking is going to assist you through the turning phase of the corner, and it's also going to help you brake a lot faster. So reducing this would be a silly idea as far as I'm concerned through a lot of cars. But having a little bit, not too much engine braking, because we don't want to have too much locking throughout the rear of the car through some of the braking phases on this circuit. And I think having zero, like the corner in the background there, it just tends to chuck the rear end out a little bit. You lose too much traction through the rear and start locking out the rear tyres, because we're going down through the gears quite quickly. Now the gear ratios are very specific. They're either set for each corner, individual corner, so that we're carrying as much speed through a corner, or like third gear is absolutely maxed out to when you should be changing, or when you should be starting to think to brake at a certain corner. I will mention that. Fourth gear as well is designed for one corner on this circuit only, but it really does assist on the exit of the corner. Second gear is set for a very specific corner as well on the circuit, and then the fifth gear and sixth gear are set because I'm absolutely maxed out in sixth gear at the longest straight, which is the first straight. And fifth gear is set quite short because it's pretty much in between these two gears. First gear, we're only going to use it for the start and one other corner, I think. Yeah, one other corner. So that's set for a specific reason as well. So when you're looking at setting your gear ratios, just think about where you're maxing out in some of your gears. Say you're approaching a corner and you've maxed out in third gear and you feel like you're having to change into fourth gear because there's a little bit more acceleration before you need to start braking. Rather than changing into fourth gear, you might look at extending third gear. Again, with sixth gear, if you feel like you've maxed out the straight and you've still got a lot of the gear ratio to go before you hit the red line in that gear, you might want to look at making sixth gear shorter. So that's the gears. Let's move on to the differential. Now, I haven't tried lowering the ramp angle too much because I feel that it just assists on corner exit having quite a high ramp angle, but I will look at adjusting this at some point. It might benefit some of the corner exits to get the power down quicker. I always think the higher the ramp angle, the less oversteer you'll get on the corner exit, but at the detriment of both wheels not working at their maximum. But if you can handle a lot of oversteer on corner exit, you might feel like you could lower this a little bit further. The preload, I've got this set. How I go about setting my preload is when I come off the throttle and go back on the power, it's almost like there's less lag between getting on the power again. So as soon as I come off the brake, I want to feel like the power's coming in. I don't want to feel like there's any sort of lagging between on and off the throttle. That's how I go about setting my preload. And the coast ramp, just to sort of help, I brought this down a little bit. I think it was around 40, or it might have been around 20, I'm not sure. But just to stop the car rotating too much on corner exit, but also rotating a little bit. I think coast ramp helps the car either rotate or not rotate whilst braking into a corner. And that's it. I've not used any of the geared LSD. I've seen a few people using that, but I don't think it benefits. I think if to be honest, if you're using the geared LSD, you should be turning off the clutch LSD. I think the viscous lock sometimes helps if you add it, but again, you could turn the clutch LSD off and use the viscous LSD. I think these are either, it's 5 selections of which type of differential you'd like to use. It's either one's on or one's off. I don't think adding the geared LSD makes much difference when you're using a clutch LSD. That's my opinion on how the limited slip diff works. And that's the setup, guys. Let's go and take a drive around the circuit, and I'll point out a few hints and tips around the track. So at the start of the circuit, sorry, I just changed out of. I was using my sequential gearbox for another car there. So when we start out with a lap, it chucks us straight in using one of our KERS boosts. Now, I've got my KERS boost set on my Y button because I just find it really easy to press the Y button. I either use this button as my handbrake, or I use it as my KERS deployment, or I'd use the X button as my DRS as well. Now, I have got the opportunity to use the double clutch release system, where you would pull both clutch paddles in, put the accelerator to flat out, and just release one of the pedals and then slowly release the other one. I don't particularly use it a great deal, but it is a feature of the wheel. If you're interested in getting it, it's quite easy to set. Anyway, coming back to this lap. This is where the lap starts. Now, that might sound funny because that's where we're starting, but as we start this first corner, it's paramount that we push the KERS as we exit this first turn. Now, the reason I'm pushing the KERS at this point, and it doesn't really benefit too much where I choose to push it, because I'm not really accelerating at maximum, but it's going to determine for the rest of the lap where the KERS runs out. So when you're choosing KERS and where you're actually pushing it, think about where it's affecting on the lap. You want to be using KERS through all the acceleration phases as best as possible throughout the whole of the lap. So while ever you're braking, you're not using the KERS. So try and think about where you're using your KERS when it comes to another circuit. Are you using it at the best place on the circuit? So as we come into the lap, we'll set off, and I'll put it into second gear here, and then I'll push the KERS button, and then we're fastly accelerating right the way up through the rev range. You want to be hitting 180 as we cross the line, really. And I'll just start slowing things down again. So just ahead of us, you can see where the tarmac changes colour. Now, I'll just move forward a little bit to it. You can see as it changes colour, we've got a few tyre marks on the road. Now this is where we want to start changing gear, and we're going to take 2 shifts down into 4th gear, and we're just going to sort of let it run for a tiny bit, and we're just sort of braking as we come down into 4th gear, and we're letting it run. So we're sort of coming off the brake pedal for a few milliseconds really before we sort of back on the power. Now, as soon as you can get back on the power, it's going to force us to start running wide, which is especially where I think the toe in and toe out helps, especially on this corner. It really does seem to help the car turn in. So as soon as we've turned in, we're back on the power. We're going to, as we sort of change up into 5th, you'll see that the KERS is available again. So as soon as the KERS is re-energized, we're going to be pressing KERS to boost again because we're accelerating again. So we've pressed the KERS button, we're up into 5th gear, as soon as we get into top of fifth gear, I'll just come back a little bit there. So it's almost where the second board, the Pirelli board is, but I seem to aim for a tiny bit of the tarmac. That's my braking point. You can see like a dark section of the tarmac that's too far. That's if you braking, then you've gone too far. I think you'll go too deep into the corner. So just about now, where you can see the shadows changing on the circuit, which I would say is around the second Pirelli board, but I would say it's about here myself, somewhere around here. You want to be dropping down from fifth down to third gear, and it's almost like a few milliseconds extra that you don't shift down to second. You sort of roll in third gear for a few seconds before you shift down to second, just to get the apex, and then you're back on the power, or you sort of braking and you're on the power very quickly in second gear. You really want to be maintaining acceleration as soon as you can, and then you just flat out then, running it wide as far as you can to keep momentum, using all the gear. The curves will still be in effect all the way down this straight. So as soon as we hit the two, or just after the two, is literally where we're going to be starting braking. And when I'm coming down through the gears here, we're up in sixth gear, I'm going to be thinking I'm coming down 4 gears. I want to be going, while I'm heavy on the brake, I want to be going 1, 2, 3, 4, down to second gear. And I'm going to hold second gear out till I really hit the apex of the corner before I drop to first. So you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's almost what I'm thinking as I come down through my gears here. So you're heavy on the brake pedal and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's sort of, you just want to hold out for changing for that last gear, because it really does sort of help the car turn as you hit first gear. And you sort of come off the brake pedal as I go into first gear, and it just almost turns the car effortlessly on its own. And then this is where we're going to be banging our curves button again. As soon as we've got the car straight, bang on the curves button. And this is where the first gear really helps, how it's set, because it's slightly longer than you would usually have it, but it just helps get the power down without too much wheel spin. So we've banged the curves button, and then up, we're going to be flat out into third gear, which is why third gear is set to what it is. So bang up to third gear, and you don't want to be braking on the top of this corner. So if you've come over the ridge of this corner, you've gone too far. If that's how you're going to decide to start braking, you want to be braking sort of now. So before you hit the top of the corner, it's a little dab of the brake down to second gear, or sort of down to second gear about here. So you're sort of braking as you come over the rise of the hill to keep the car planted, and then a little drop down into second gear, and then sort of come off the brake pedal, and it just helps the car turn. And as soon as you can get back on the power, second gear is set because it aids in the acceleration out of this corner and out of the next corner, the next left-hander. So as you come out of here, you're running wide, and there are no curbs on this circuit that you want to touch. You don't want to touch any of them because they'll cause you problems. So you still got your curves, it's boosting away up to second gear, and you want to sort of gauge this corner so that you don't hit any of the curb. It's a really fine needle to thread as you come through here. You'll be up to fifth gear. And then again on the left hand side, the number 2, we want to be braking 2 shifts down and then a last shift down to second gear, really getting close to this curb but don't touch it. It'll run wide. You can take a tiny bit of this curb, barely anything, and you'll be accelerating again. Right about now, you'll be wanting to boost your curves button again, up to third gear, and you'll be absolutely flat out through this corner in fourth gear, and right about around here somewhere, you'll take the tiniest of lifts off the accelerator, and I don't even mean fully off it. It's sort of like a half lift off the accelerator and then back full down on the accelerator. And you sort of want to stay as close to this inside curb as you can possibly get. There's just loads more grip through the inside there. And you'll be running out, and this is why fourth gear is set to what it is, because you're going to stay in fourth gear as you come out of there. Flat up to the top of fourth gear, and that, you'll be still boosting curves all the way around here. Fifth gear, flat out through here, taking the line of least resistance as you come through here. Barely wanting to turn the car at all. You're still going to be flat out with curves all the way up here. Now, this is such a hard braking point to hit, and it's almost just as you've passed the 3 or on the 3, you're going to be dropping down 4 gears, and like before, sort of holding out for second gear a little bit on this apex. And if you can run as close to this apex without touching it as possible, this is probably one of the hardest corners to nail, because as soon as you're straight, you want to be banging that curves button again. Flat out all the way through here, no lifts at all, hugging it as close as you can, up to 5th gear, and then between, just gone too far there. You see the 2 cones and then the 1 cone. Halfway between these 2 cones, you want to be dropping down to 3rd gear, heavy on the brake pedal and then off the brake pedal, and just really tentative through here. It's so tentative to stay in 3rd gear and keep the power sort of moving, and then you flat out to the finish line. You'll still be boosting curves from the previous corner, and that'll be you taking you to the finish line. I don't particularly think the car works well doing 2 laps. I think because you're going to run out of curves, to be honest. I think you'll deplete all your curves in the 1 lap, so it's 1 flying lap and that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. I hope there's a few points in there that will help you get faster, especially in this current time trial that I'm taking part in, and maybe for future events it might be a good setup for a few of the circuits. But definitely pay attention to where the curves works best throughout the circuit. Think about where you're going to deploy it. But it's literally constant on this circuit. From that first turn, as soon as it runs out, redeploy the curves again. I don't think there's any other tips I can divulge for this walkthrough. But that's it. Hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. Hit the like and subscribe button. Please do leave a comment. Thank you to all my subscribers. Finally hitted 300 subscribers. It feels like a milestone to myself, but obviously it's a tiny figure in the world of YouTube. But to all my subscribers, I really do thank you a lot for subscribing to the channel, for watching my videos, and for leaving any of your comments. They're always welcome. Thanks again, guys, and until next time, as always, ciao for now.